Rise up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're burning daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burning Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy.
Well, howdy there, daylight burners. Happy, I believe this will be Friday when this comes out. The Patreon will be, I guess it'll be early Friday morning. Everybody else will be Friday afternoon, but I hope you had a good week. Sorry I haven't put out any, I haven't been real regular on putting out a podcast episode here lately, and that's mostly my fault. But it is, I guess it's a 5-year anniversary of the Burning Daylight podcast. I started this thing in 2019. I believe it was like June 12th or something like that when I put out the first one. So right around today is the 20th. And so it's been right at 5 years. I started this thing 2019. I've been just past the 10-year anniversary working in the feedlot. Pretty much all of it has been riding pins, one sort or another. But I've been around the feedlot world for a while now, and experienced pretty much all of it. I haven't been the big boss of an outfit, but all but, I guess. And I started this show to highlight the working cowboy, and I've talked to a lot of working cowboys over the 5 years that I've done this. Excuse me. But I guess the longer I've done it, the more I've been involved and engaged. I've learned that I'm not that good of a working cowboy when it comes down to it. I've done a few things, but mostly I'm a feedlot guy. I'm a pin rider, feedlot cowboy for the most part, and that's what I know. That's what I'm good at. And even though I've been around a little bit elsewhere, done some other things, I've kind of made a career out of being in the feedlot, and I find no shame in that. Some, I wouldn't say disappointment, but some kind of not even regret. I don't regret being in the feedlot. It's treated me pretty well, but there's times where I wish I'd done some other things, or I was currently doing some other things. But when it comes down to it, it's hard to beat the pay. It's hard to beat the hours. And I'm pretty good at what I do. And I don't say that to brag or boast. I just kind of look back over my career and think, yeah, I've done a pretty decent job of it, and I've stuck it out, learned a lot, and I've learned tremendously from talking to guys that have either worked in the feedlot or not. I've learned a lot from guys that have worked exclusively outside. And excuse me, I have got a horrible itch in my throat. Anyway, I think we're back. I think maybe I got that under control. One of the downfalls of working in a feedlot is it's pretty dirty, pretty dusty, and you kind of end up with a chronic stuffy nose or cough or something of the like. Mine's more of a nose thing usually than a cough, but for whatever reason, my throat's awful scratchy tonight. But I wanted to kind of come at this. I've talked about feedlots before quite a bit, and I've done several episodes of just feedlot centric, but I thought maybe I should impart some of my knowledge that I've gained over the years, and maybe I'll make this a recurring episode. I tried to go old school, like when I first started and record all horseback. It didn't work out. I found I like this setup a lot better. It's a lot easier to deal with. I can plop myself down in a chair. Got my snooze handy, and got old Coors Yellow Belly, glass of water, and it's a lot nicer to sit down and talk like this. Yeah, so 15 years in the feedlot. I'd be lying to you if I thought this is where I'd be. When I started this show, made the goal to 5 years of doing it and be able to be doing this full time, maybe transition out of feedlot work. And to a certain extent, that's still the goal. However, I don't know. I kind of like getting up, going in the morning. I've worked my way up to where I can do little bit of stuff kind of on my own pace, on my own time. There's obviously a set starting time at every feedlot you go to. It's a little bit like shift work in a factory. A lot of guys that listen to the show don't necessarily. Blue collar is a term that gets kicked around a lot, and maybe that's somewhat accurate. But I don't know, agriculture, at least in the beef part of the world, there's not necessarily a shift work. You kind of just work. There's obviously exceptions to the rule. There's calving season, particularly with your calving heifers. You got night calvers. Feedlot, you got your shipping crew. If you're shipping cattle to start the kill to the plant for the day, you gotta get them out of off the yard early and to the plant and ready to be inspected, all that good stuff. So there definitely are shift type crews that exist, but for the most part, what I've learned in my now 38 years of being alive and 15 in the feedlot is shift work is something for a different industry. There's we kind of work on a different schedule, and I'm not saying that's bad or good. It just kind of is. You deal with live animals, and it's fairly unpredictable. The more I'm around them, the more I see cattle like people, and I don't know if that's if that's denigrating the animal or the person or both or neither. Depends on the situation. It just the more I've been around, the more it seems like they cattle and people both kind of act the same. When I started back in 2009, I hired on to one of the biggest feedlots in the U.S., if not probably a top 10 capacity feedlot in the world at Grant County Feeders in Ulysses, Kansas. I signed on in the shipping receiving department and saw a lot of cows. Learned a whole lot. I was there 18 months and it felt shorter and longer at the same time. And then moved on to a considerably smaller yard, but almost as big of a company in Cactus Feeders. Learned a whole different department. Helped out on, when I moved over to Cactus, I was I hired on as a feed foreman. So kind of like the assistant feed manager, essentially is what it was, but title and pay were not quite commensurate. But one thing you learn from working in a corporate type structure is titles really only mean anything when you tie them to your pay scale. When I worked for Cactus, I did everything the assistant feed manager does. I did essentially everything that an assistant GM of a feed yard did not have the title. I think the entire time I worked there was at the foreman level, regardless of doing things outside that pay grade and not getting paid for it. Learned a lot from that. So some of you younger guys remember that just because you may be doing the work, you may not exactly be getting paid for what you're doing. And that's not a slight to the company. It's not even a slight against you. That's just once again, it just kind of is. That's just how things work. And there's ways to get around that. We'll talk a little bit more about navigating the feedlot world and in turn the corporate world. And but I want to talk about a few of the things, I guess, that make me a good pen rider, a good feedlot employee. And I say that because my last two real jobs, I would I worked for myself for a little while, and then I worked for Kansas State Research Farm through the extension program for a brief period of time. But by and large, I'm a feedlot guy, and that's what I've done my two over the past 15 years. I worked for a company for 18 months, another one for 6 years, and now this current one where I'm at is about 7 or a little over 7. So, like I said, I've made myself desirable as an employee, and I have the skill set for the most part to show that I'm getting I'm getting paid what I'm worth for the most part. There's always a strange kind of push and pull between the employer and the employee. And some of you guys that run your own outfits, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Guys have been around a little bit on the hired hand. Employee in the employee role, you know what I'm talking about as well. And some of you younger or more inexperienced guys, you'll figure it out. Son of a bitch, falling apart over here. But some of you younger guys that haven't been around them long enough, you'll find out in due time what I'm talking about when it comes to that relationship between the employee and the employer. And being in the corporate world, sometimes that line gets very murky, very, very blurred. And particularly when you work for a huge outfit. At the time, it was JBS when I worked for Grant County Feeders, JBS 5 Rivers. Now it's just JBS. But while the owners changed, I don't know how much the structure of the company changed in and of itself. I've had the pleasure to work with a lot of good guys. Most are still with us. A few that have passed on. R.I.P. Galen Mitchell. He was one of the guys that hired me at Grant County, and he passed away from some sort of cancer here a couple of years ago. But really good guy, and enjoy it. I only worked with him for a short amount of time, but we remained in contact and pretty good friends. And yeah, I wish I would have been able to see him there towards the end, but that's kind of, I won't say it's neither here nor there, but I wanted to give a quick shout out to him. One of the guys that, even though I didn't work with for very long, he made a pretty big impact on me. And being around as long as I have been, I've also had the fortune / misfortune. I've had the I've had the opportunity to work for just about every size of feedlot operation you can think of. When I was day working, I helped somewhat with small backgrounder type operations that were strictly supplemental to like a cow calf operation. You wean your calves and feedlot them for 30, 45, 60 days, however long the particular operation did. But essentially it was they own their own little background and yard, and it was pretty small time as far as feedlots go. But I've also had the opportunity to work in 100,000 plus head feedlots, and smaller types. I've been around a lot of like 70 to 80,000 head feedlots. Not worked for them directly, but seeing how they operate. I've known a lot of the guys that held management roles there. I've known a lot of the guys that held just strictly hourly or wage earning type jobs, pen writer in particular. And so I guess all that being said, I've seen a little bit of everything. I don't claim to be the most well-versed guy, but I've been around a little bit, and I've seen quite a lot. And I've seen a lot of cycles come and go. I've seen the industry change quite a bit. I was at the forefront of trying to trying to really change the feedlot world, combine it with the cow calf world, and kind of revolutionize the beef industry, the beef cattle industry. Um, some success, a lot of failure. At one point, I don't know if I still am, but at one point I was one of the world's foremost I guess expert, you would say. And not that I was particularly good at the job, but I'd had just about as much experience as anybody on the face of the earth at one point, running confined cow calf operations and a vertically integrated beef industry for the essentially vertically integrated. I'm sure I signed a non-disclosure at some point with Cactus, but I guess if they want to send me a cease and desist, they can go ahead and do so. But I worked for at one point the world's largest confined cow calf herd, or operation, whatever you want to call it, cow calf operation with the biggest herd in the U.S. for sure, probably the world. What we were doing at Cactus was pretty had the opportunity to be pretty revolutionary. Got to work with a lot of high level genetics, and then from there moved out to Nevada, and I've worked for a yard that's not exclusively dairy heifer oriented, but pretty heavily influenced, but also beef backgrounding yard, and had a lot of experience with Mexican cattle. And I gotta say, when all is said and done, I really like this Nevada outfit. California gets kind of a bad rap from most of the country because the people that run the state are idiots. But I've met a lot of good people from California that still live there or grew up there, one or the other, and a lot of really good hands, and just good solid people all the way around. And the company that I work for is based out of California, and the bulk of their operations are out of California. And I've got nothing but good things to say about them. And because of that, I won't mention them by name. But if it wouldn't take you very long to Google or listen back through the podcast and find out who I work for. But it's I look back on it, and I got a lot more gray in the old beard than I used to. A lot more gray in my hair. Can't see it under this San Francisco Giants hat. I'm a Rockies fan, but Willie Mays just died here the other day, so it seemed appropriate to wear a San Francisco Giants hat. But underneath that, if you're watching on video, you can see I'm pretty well salt and peppered up in my beard and my head of hair, all the way around. I've been fortunate enough not to lose a whole lot of hair off the top, so I can wear it long, or wear a hat just to piss off my buddies who don't have a full head of hair anymore, and I can also poke a little bit of fun at them. So while my hair is gray and getting grayer by the day, it's still for the most part all there. So suck on that, all you baldies. Speaking of baldies, I really like a baldy steer or heifer to feed out. They grow good. Sickness seems to stick out a little bit more just because how their faces built, situated, however you want to characterize it. But the face on your cattle, kind of one of the foremost indicators of whether they're sick or not. So the easier it is to see when one's sick, the better job you can do as a pin rider. The white faced cattle, they obviously have a reputation of being bad eyes, which feedlot, if you're feeding them out, it doesn't really matter that much. Seeing how we feed a lot of replacement heifers, I've learned to pay a little closer attention over the years. But that being said, most of the cattle I deal with are young enough where you don't have to deal with cancer eyes, and a bad eye on a steer. It's kind of wasted medicine. As cruel as that may sound to some people, you gotta read the room that you're in, and my room being the feedlot. I don't know. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to the eyes. If they can make it to the bunk and to the water tank, and then follow the rest of the pen out the gate when I need them to without too much trouble. A bad eye is just a bad eye. It's not going to hurt much. Kind of rambling here, but it's kind of how I do things. But to start out with, because I do want to impart some of this knowledge that I've accrued over the years to some of the younger or more inexperienced guys. Feedlots are pretty easy to get hired on to, for the most part, particularly nowadays. It's just the older you get, the more that old saying, it's hard to find good help. You find that that's true, kind of, and I'm sure that's kind of true everywhere. We give these younger guys a lot of grief for being soft and not good help, and a lot of times some of the loudest complainers about how shitty a help the younger generation is are the same people that happen to have kids in that generation. And well, you gotta teach them from to know stuff. So that's what I'm gonna try to do here. But that being said, it's not hard to get hired onto a feedlot. If resumes, are they necessary? No, not really, but it's not all that hard to make one. And it sure doesn't hurt to have one, particularly if you're not looking to stay on with the outfit you're with. My word, I've got everything falling apart here. Everything. There we go. So if you're planning on packing up and leaving, not a bad idea to keep your resume updated. And some guys, I've read resumes that were handwritten on a piece of legal paper. I've never had anybody write one on the back of a napkin. I always kind of wanted to see one of those. But for the most part, we live in a computer computer dominated era, and it's just not that hard to make a decent looking resume, even if your work experience is pretty limited. And by that I mean either not having a long term employment or being employed by the same company for many years, and yeah, not having a whole lot to put on that resume. But that being said, it's you're gonna have to have a resume at some point, regardless of whether you like to make a professional looking one or not. Whether you write one down on a piece of paper or you type it out, it's still a resume, and chances are whoever's hiring is going to look at it. Whether they hold much stock in it or not, that's a whole different story. But just rule of thumb, it's a pretty good idea to have one. They put everything on a cloud service nowadays, so you make one in Microsoft Word or Google Documents, and you can store it in the cloud indefinitely. So once you make one, it's pretty easy to update it from there. And it's, I don't know, feedlot or not, it's not a bad habit to just keep one updated. Go through it every 6 months, a year, whatever, and just update the dates, update your phone number, email, all that good stuff. And you may not have to update anything but the dates worked, but it doesn't take much to make one, and like I said, it's pretty handy when you pack up and leave to have one that's already fairly up to date, that you don't have to finagle with a whole lot. Second thing is just about every cowboy outfit that I can think of. Not all. There's always exceptions to the rule, but your outfits that used to provide horses for you kind of just got away from that, because it's a liability issue, and you about have to have your own horse if you're wanting to go cowboy pretty much anywhere. So sorry, my eyes were bothering me. Once again, feedlot stuff. You'll get some itchy eyes involved with being in a dry, dusty environment most of your waking hours. Comes with the job. But I would venture to say, and I'm sure there's, like I said, there's exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, you probably better have your own horse. You better have a good saddle. Good tack is, I've learned, very subjective. Buying a custom made saddle is always going to be nicer. You're probably going to have, depends on who you get it from, but you're probably going to have some sort of personal relationship with the maker. And that being said, it's they're nice to have, but yeah, you're going to pay for it. And some that may be worth it to you, it may not. Over the years, I've I don't know, if you're buying your own horses, I'd rather. I don't want to skimp on anything, but I'll I'll take a deal on a saddle before I take a deal on a horse. Because you can work your way around a saddle that don't quite fit right a lot easier than you can work your way around a horse that don't quite fit right. And if you're the more skilled you get, you can kind of work around both. But I would say buy the saddle you can afford, and buy the horse you can afford. Buy as nice stuff as you can possibly swing with the money or trading ability that you have. That it'll it'll sure pay off in the long run. I've had some okay saddles, and I've had some not good saddles. I have one right now that's not particularly good, but it doesn't soar a horse, and it'll probably fall apart at some sooner rather than later. But in this economy, is what I could scrounge around, and I didn't have a whole lot to trade other than horse flesh, and horse flesh can be pretty tough to trade if you don't if you got stuff that's designed for you or broke to your style. Anyways, just another long roundabout rambling way to say that have your own shit. Can't stress that enough. There's a lot of times, particularly on bigger outfits, where particularly if they run through a lot of help, they have a lot of extra stuff laying around, and they can usually outfit you. But even if you read back to the old timers, they bought their own stuff as soon as they could. If and most everybody who was serious about making some sort of go at cowboying, at the very least, had their own saddle to start with. Whether it was good or not, it makes a difference, because you know where to set your stirrups, you know how it rides, you know how it fits, and even if like I said, even if it's a ill fitting saddle and doesn't sit very well, you at least know it, and those are the type of rigs that you can get along with a lot better than something that you're not used to. I mean, just go work for somebody else one time where you just show up and they got a saddle and a horse for you, and might turn out good at most of the time. It may not turn out bad, but I guarantee you by the end of the day, you'd wish you'd brought your own stuff, and more often than not, you kind of wish you had your own horse, because it just, if it's yours, you know it. You know it better. Horse, tack, whatever the case may be. Going into a feedlot, you may think you know cattle, and you'll learn, particularly if it's a busy year. And like it looks like we're kind of turning the corner on increasing the herd size across the U.S. Seems like the drought, for the most part, broke. I mean, there's, again, exceptions to the rule. There's places that are still god awful dry that are still selling off their herd, liquidating. But I've heard a lot more reports of heifers being kept back for breeding purposes, and that's a sign that we got cattle coming in the future. The beef cattle cycle it takes a long time to get a cow bred, put a calf on the ground, and then grow that calf to slaughter weight. It's about a 2-year process, and you kind of got to keep that in mind as if you're planning on sticking around. Well, really any aspect of the cattle world, but being a feedlot guy, I'll speak feedlot. Like, you gotta not necessarily plan out your schedule years ahead, but if you hear reports of particularly when you're low on numbers, you hear reports of guys holding back heifers. The next year you're good chance that you may not get slammed with cattle, but good chance you're going to get some more on feed. You pay attention to the rainfall and the corn numbers to a certain extent. You don't have to get very, very into the weeds on that, but if it's raining in Iowa, feed's going to be cheap. If it's raining around you, hay is going to be cheaper, and all of that means guys are going to look at it and say, I could put some cheap pounds on in the feedlot, or the market might be right to sell their cattle. And there's not many people that retain ownership anyways. So you just know that when feed's cheap, good chance you're going to get a pretty good slug of cattle if they're available. So when you hear, I think it was Wyatt King that sent me a reel the other day about, I think it was up in Montana, guy talking about they're starting to see some heifer retention, and overall that's a good thing, because more heifers getting bred means more calves to feed in the future. For you guys outside, more heifers getting bred, that means more heifers to calve, and more work, but it's all in all, it's a good thing. Unless there's some sort of truth to this cow farts causing climate change. If that thing's real, then maybe it's not so hot that people are retaining heifers, meaning they're trying to grow their herd. But I don't put a whole lot of stock in that. So heifers being held back for breeding purposes, that's a good thing. We're gonna see some cattle, more so than we have in the last couple of years, over the next few years, and it's something good to keep in the back of your mind, particularly now with us, where we're in our slow period, where we don't have a whole lot going on. It's a good time to take vacation. One of the great things about working in the feedlot is you have set hours. You have a set paycheck that typically doesn't bounce. I've never had one bounce. And you also have perks of the job, like paid time off and vacation and all that good stuff that typically comes with an office job. Also comes to a lesser extent when you delve into the feedlot world. We're still the only, as far as I know, the only industry in America that is exempt from required overtime pay. And I'm not a fan of government intervention, but I would be a big fan of overtime pay. But I also knew that getting into this world, and I've accepted a long time ago that, yeah, you don't have a 40-hour work week. You just have a work week, and sometimes that stretches into a couple of weeks or a month, or a couple months, just depending on the situation. But going back to thinking cattle, you might, but you're going to learn a lot more riding past the same cattle every single day, and you're going to be able to read them a lot more in depth, particularly on the health side of things, but also on moving them. You you learn all the little nuances of cows. You get to learn a lot about your horse. Get to learn a lot about yourself, and luckily, I'm the type of guy that doesn't get real cheesed off at stuff quickly. I don't I don't get mad very easy. I hold my temper well, and that's a good thing. One thing you'll hear a lot in the cowboy world. I won't say universally because there's, again, exceptions to the rule, but you hear it a lot. That slower is faster. Back off and give them room. There's a lot to that. Low stress handling does not mean no stress handling. So you get to learn, like I said, those little nuances. There's times where the best way to take one out the gate is at a long trot or a short lope. There's sometimes best way to take them out the gate is at a dead run if they want them to turn back on you. But more often than not, if you give them space and just nudge them out the gate to where they can see a hole, they'll typically go. And it's one of those things you learn over time, and your horse makes a big difference. I've after moving across the country, I've talking to as many guys that I have on the show. Big horses are desirable. Guys like a big horse, but I've come to the conclusion, for my particular skill set, and how I collect my paycheck, I like a short, stocky, agile horse, something that can move quick side to side, and something. If you got a horse that can read cattle, even halfway as good as your eye, that sure helps a bunch. I've got a good mare that I wish I could have got some babies out of her. I don't know. I don't think it's ever going to happen. And last time I tried, set me back pretty good penny. So, I just gotta keep looking for horses that are built and have a mind like she does. But she knows where I'm going. She knows she can read what the cow is going to do. A feedlot horse gets a little sour. You got to give them breaks, and you overwork them, and you either end up peddling them through the pen, or you're in their mouth all the time trying to slow them down because they get they get real antsy. They know their job, and believe it or not, a horse likes to run. They really do. So if you're in the feedlot for an extended period of time, it's good to keep your horses on rotation. Kick them out on grass whenever you can, and don't be afraid to saddle up a good horse when you got shit to do. Everybody likes riding a colt. Everybody likes the challenge of teaching a young horse something. And I'm no different than the rest. I haven't had a young horse in a couple of years, but I've learned over the years, like I said, 15 or so years in the feedlot, 15 years about. A good horse is the one that you saddle when you got a lot of shit to do, and it's kind of a raw deal for your horse because they're going to get worked harder. And there's times when you don't have much of a choice. You've been riding your good horses, and it's no different than cowboying. And there's times where you're just like, all right, well, I got a job to do. I'm not particularly well mounted, but we got shit to do anyways. So suck it up, step on, and go get your job done. It's there's not too many ways around that. So when you can, ride your good horse when you're busy, and save your younger horses for go homes, put aways, whatever you want to call it. Terminology is a little different depending on where you go, but go homes is a pretty universal term for the feedlot world. You got sick cattle, you got to put them up, and everybody's got their own protocol. We like to doctor and take them home the same day, and only have a hospital pin for ones that truly need it. So when we're out of the Mexican steers by now, but there for a while we were real hot and heavy in them, and we had a hospital pin that had a handful of 6, but for the most part it was just bullers. It's bullers are a crazy thing. Anybody that's not familiar with them, they're steers that will ride another steer in the pen. Most of the time, the animal they're riding is sick. So you see one getting fucked on pretty good. Get him out of the pen because they will ride him down. And chances are, when you run a thermometer up them, they're going to temp hot. Whether that's because of increased activity or sickness or both, hard to tell. As far as I know, we're still not real sure what causes a buller. There's not really a good treatment for it other than getting them out of the pen. Sometimes you can let them dry out, which is a technical term because they get licked on, they get they get a nose in their flank, and they do sweat, not as much as we do, but cattle do sweat from time to time. And something's been rode quite a bit, they're gonna be pretty wet. So sometimes you can just set them off to the side, kick them out in the alley or on a water pen or something, and just let them relax, let them catch their breath. And a lot of times you can turn them back in and not have an issue with them. A lot of times you can't. What makes the difference? Hell if I know. After 15 years of being around these critters, all I can say is that gayness abounds in cattle just as much. Well, maybe not just as much, but gayness abounds in cattle depending on the season, just like it does in humans. And is it right? Probably not. But we're dealing with animals. They don't know right from wrong. Is it natural? One wouldn't think it is, but you see it. So is it natural? I don't know. Kinda, maybe, sorta. I don't know. Bullers is one of those topics where there's just not a whole lot into it. But there's a pretty good solution to making sure they don't die, and that's to get them out of the pen. And they're easy to spot. Look for the one that's getting fucked all the time. And make sure you kick them out, either let them dry off or keep them away from the ones that are fucking them for a little bit, at the very least, if not for good. Once they head up to the scale, and depending on how you guys handle your cattle, we weigh everything on the ground, and we also weigh our trucks. So you get a draft weight on the scale, and then you get a empty and a heavy weight on your trucks as they leave the yard. As far as bullers go, you can, for the most part, throw them right on top, and once they're on a truck, that the whole buller activity kind of goes down to zero. Mostly because there's not enough room for them to go ahead and get after it. The ones that are the bottoms, if you will. I don't know if there is a power bottom in gay cattle. I'd have to think on that a little bit. And seeing how we don't have a whole lot of bullers at the moment, it might be a while before I get back to you on that. Whether or not there's a power bottom in the bovine species. But the guy that he took out of the pen because he was getting rode hard and put up wet, when you throw him back on top of a pen that's getting weighed and shipped, if it's still an issue that they're gonna get humped on a little bit, once they get on a truck, they'll probably cower in a corner, and well, there's just not much room for something that wants to fuck him to go ahead and do so. And yeah, so pay attention to your bullers, but don't sweat it. If you don't have an answer for it, don't feel bad. Not many people do. Biggest thing you can do is get them out of the pen, and at the very least, let them dry off. That happens usually spring and summer, but you'll have some in the winter. When I worked at Grant County, our buller pens would go from like 75 head in a section over the winter to sometimes you'd have 2 or 3 buller pens with a couple hundred head in it. And I remember when I interviewed with Cactus, the GM at the time, he asked me about if we had a problem with bullers. So, oh yeah, we have plenty of bullers. And I think when I started there, they had about 37,000 head of cattle. And he said, we pulled 8 bullers on the day, or 5 bullers, something like, I think it was 8. Yeah, it was 8. He said, we pulled 8 bullers today. And I said, well, I pulled 11 yesterday by myself. So, when you have a bigger yard, you're obviously gonna have more, but also with a bigger yard comes not only higher numbers, but you have like a higher prevalence, higher percentage as well. It seems like when the more cattle you crowd into a spot, the more issues you're going to have, and that's just kind of the name of the game. Oh, I was going to say, moving across the country, the cattle change, the horses change, and it's important to know the difference. Out in Nevada, where everything's kind of high desert, you get some long-legged cattle and you get some long-legged horses, because both of them have to cover a lot of territory. And yeah, if you got a horse with long legs, it's easier to cover some ground and not wear them out quite as bad. And the cattle are the same way. We we got a set of cattle in the other day that are kind of Hereford Angus crosses, but there's some ear, probably about an eighth. If you go back in their genetics, they're probably about an eighth of some sort of Bramer cross. But the cattle we got are outside a little bit of ear and a lot of leg. They're just Herefords and Baldies for the most part. And like I said, I like a bald faced cow. I like a Charolais type cow in the feedlot. They're easier to spot when they're sick, and particularly as long as you don't have the big droop-eared Bramer, Brangus, Brayford, some sort of Bramer cross that's really got a lot of ear to them. Those cattle are harder to read with the floppy ears because their ears are down naturally. So it's something to get used to. And like I said before, if you think you know cattle, well, you might know a little bit, but you're going to learn a lot more because you're going to see a lot more. Speaking of the new set of cattle we got in, I kind of wanted to touch on how to think about your cattle. And it'll change from outfit to outfit depending on who owns the cattle. The company I work for, they send us they send us all the Mexicans in the spring, and depending on the year, there's a good pile of them. And like this year there was a lot. And even though the owner has the final say in how you treat your cattle, you kind of gotta treat them like they're your own, and you're gonna treat different owners differently. So we got this set of cattle in 3 loads. They're weighing about 8.5, and pretty lined out for the most part. Don't have a whole lot of health issues. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see how long that holds up. But those new cattle, it's a new customer, and we're gonna feed them out to slaughter. This will be the first time we've done that on a large scale since I've been here. We typically just background, or we have some local guys that feed a handful out. We got a guy that's probably got 20 head in the feedlot all the time, and we got another guy that's got 3 or 4. We got another guy that sends us burnout roping steers and heifers, and sell some beef on the side. But for the most part, we don't feed out cattle. We're kind of strictly a background operation or a grower operation for the dairy heifers. And those dairy owners, there's 3 of them that send us cattle, and I'm gonna treat them different, at least initially, than I do this new customer that is feeding cattle out all the way to slaughter. There's a new packing plant supposed to be opening here pretty close by, and it sounds like this could be a long-term thing with this particular owner with the tall, rangy Hereford and Angus cross Baldy type cattle. And some people will tell you different, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but for me, this has worked out pretty good over the years. Particularly on a new customer, I want to be very, very selective on what I pull, because I want that customer to come on back. Company owned cattle, a little different story. You're going to get a lot more volume on those, so you know what you're looking for. You tend to know the origins of the cattle that they send you, and you kind of know what to expect. This new owner customer, um, I've seen his cattle. They've been here about right at a week, I suppose, and I could have went real deep in a pen pulling stuff, and a good chance a lot of them would attempt hot. A lot of them wouldn't have. But I want to be real selective because every time you run them through a chute, the dollar depends on where you're at, obviously, but you charge them a fee every time they go through the chute. Ours is I think it's $1, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but just we'll just call it $1 because it's a good round number, even though that may be exactly what we charge. I don't want to say for sure. I don't want to give away industry secrets, but we'll say for for saying's sake that every time you run them through the chute, it's $1 a head that you gotta, whether they're sick or not, it's $1 a head. And anybody that owns cattle knows that margins are awful tight, and $1 plus another $10 medicine charge on top of the chute charge could be the difference from that animal breaking even, and or going from being profitable to unprofitable. Margins are very, very thin. So I want to do a good job. I'm not saying that I'm not going to pull on these cattle. I'm not going to ignore them, but I'm going to be very selective, and I want to make sure that general rule of thumb is when you run something through the chute, you should have about, if you're seeing your cattle right, you should have about 75 to 80% that temp hot versus 20 to 25 that don't. I want to be way closer to 100% of the cattle that I pull from this new customer. I want to be as close to 100% being treated when I send them through the chute as I can. And sometimes you're not going to be 100% almost ever. There's times where I've ran 100% on cattle, but more often than not, that 20 to 25% rule is a pretty good rule of thumb. Should we do a good job and we don't, we're well within the break even on death loss that they figured in on these cattle, and come probably November they'll go to the kill floor, and we want them to come back the highest quality carcass that we can. And I want that customer to make all the money he can. I want him to show that it pays off sending his cattle to the feedlot. And for me personally, I don't like dairy cattle, but they pay the bills and I see them a lot. And I get tired of seeing them. So every time we get some new beef cattle in, it's kind of a treat. And but after a while, even beef cattle get pretty boring. The longer they're on feed, the more they become like a Holstein. You get used to them, they get used to you, and you get pretty complacent on it. I don't want to do that with this new owner. At some point, it's going to happen should they stick around, but I want to make sure they make all the money they can. I want to keep their medicine cost as low as I can. Same goes for company-owned cattle. But this is a little different situation because I want them to stick around. Now, if they send another set of cattle and they look a little puny, I'm going to go in a little deeper. I'm not going to be as selective as I am right now on what I pull. I'm gonna pull more in bulk, and And you hope you end up with a bunch of cattle that don't temp hot. It's less work for you when you doctor them, and it helps you kind of fine tune your eye. So if you're inexperienced younger guy, my advice is if you have to look twice at them, go ahead and send them to the chute. Make sure you pay attention to them when they come out of the chute, whether you doctored them or not. And if you did doctor them, take note of what you see, because chances are you're going to see more of those, and you're going to be able to pick them out a lot easier in the future. You don't know what you don't know, and a lot of cowboying is trial by fire. The only way you learn is by doing something. The only way you really learn, anyways. So don't be afraid to pull. For you younger guys, go ahead and pull deep if you have to. But also read the room a little bit. Is it a new customer? Are they company-owned cattle? Is it an old, long-standing customer that kind of knows the business? Either way, we live in a capitalist society for the most part, and we keep our job by doing a good job. We retain customers by doing a good job on their cattle. And so we got this new customer, and I want to treat them well. I want their cattle to perform as well as they can. I want to make it worth his while to keep sending cattle to us, and then hopefully tell his friends and be like, hey, they do a good job. And if they make a bunch of money, I know ranchers aren't one to to tell about all their money they're making, but people talk, and it's not unusual for a guy to say like, oh, I sent my cattle over here to this feedlot and they did a hell of a good job, and beat the break even, and I made money on those cattle. Well, that says a lot to somebody who's thinking about, should I expand my herd? Expand the herd. A lot of times you got to kick cattle off the mama earlier to conserve grass. Well, give them a good soft landing spot to send those cattle. And where we're a custom feeding yard. I want to see more and more of these local guys sending not just a couple head to feed out, but a couple truckloads. And to do that, you got to make it worth their while. So once again, I'm going to be a little more selective on what I bring through the chute, and I want to be pretty goddamn sure that that they need doctored when I bring them to the chute. I say I want to do that with every cow that I pull, but particularly with a new customer. Like I said, you want to set a good example, let them know that it's worth their while, and don't overload them on medicine fees when you don't have to. There comes a time when it's also, for you younger guys, knowing when to quit. Just call it good for the day. Make sure you're not gonna you didn't miss something real obvious that needs doctored that day. But if your cattle are stirred up, your horse is getting wound up, call it good. Call it good on that pin. Move on. Start over again the next day. So see how they how they do in the chute. If you're working for really any feedlot worth its salt, they're going to have a good thermometer there. You can't tell everything from a thermometer, but it tells you a hell of a lot that you can't see with your eyeballs right off the bat. I've got pretty good at kind of predicting at the very least, whether or not they're gonna temp hot or not. But I've got a lot better in predicting exactly what temperature they're gonna show on that thermometer as well. And I'm not afraid to go ahead and doctor something if they don't temp. My job is animal welfare, cattle health, and there's been many a time where I see one in the chute with snot running out his nose and maybe not particularly ganned up, but you can tell this animal don't look right. And you put a thermometer in them and they temp like a 102.6. Right. Maybe marginally over the average temperature. It'll depend on where you work at, but general rule of thumb is anything over 103.5 is considered hot, sick, needs to be treated. Some yards have it higher to cut down on medicine costs, and that gets a little bit trickier. But good rule of thumb is 103.5. So once again, don't be afraid to pull. Pay attention to your cattle after you doctor them. And if you're not on the doctor crew, go back and look at your cattle and see which ones temped hot, which ones didn't. And make note what the one that didn't temp. Say you thought they're gonna be sicker than a dog and they temped a 101.8. Average temperature range for cattle is about 101.5 to 102.5. So if they're right in that range, chances are they're good. Take a look at them before you let them out of the chute. But that thermometer tells you a whole lot. It really does. It's a good, useful tool. There's a lot of guys that don't want to use it because they're stuck in their ways, and they swear that they can see cattle. They don't need a goddamn thermometer, and you're seeing a lot less of that nowadays. I'm not saying you got to live by it like it's the good book, but it's a pretty good tool. Even if you're out in the open and you're doctoring by yourself, not a bad habit to get one of those little baby thermometers. A lot of times, guys outside, if they got something roped and tied down, they're going to doctor it whether they need to or not, and it's not a bad habit. But you can make an animal sick pretty quick by pulling them and doctoring them when they don't need to be doctored. So all of that being said is I pulled one off this new set of cattle from this new customer, and he temped like a 104.8 or so, something like that. Pretty hot, not screaming hot. Still on the upswing. Pretty feisty fella. Tried to jump through the chute a couple times. But I took a good look at him going back to the pen. It's a new set of cattle, and cow is a cow all day long. But cows are a lot like people. They have different personalities. They have different temperaments. They have different ways they handle stress and sickness. So I wanted to take a good look at this one before I turned him back in with the rest of his buddies. And so now I'm not set on what I'm looking for by any means in that pin, but now I've got my first indicator of what maybe to look for. And this was a kind of a Hereford cross, solid white face, tall, leggy, lanky, rangy cattle. That's a good term to use for them, is rangy. But now I kind of know what to look for, and I'll be a little more on the lookout for cattle like that as I ride through them tomorrow, day after, and in the weeks and months to come. You gotta constantly be training your eye, particularly if those animals are going to be there for 150, 180 days. You're gonna have to see them every day, and the older and the heavier they get, the less obvious it becomes that they're going to be sick if they're just a little bit sick. Now, if they're real sick, they'll show it. They'll be ganned up and hanging back from the bunk and lethargic. There's a lot of little different cues you can pick up on them, but the older, the heavier they get, the harder that becomes to see. And the longer they're there, the more complacent you get. You get in a habit of just kind of almost riding by them. Like, oh, they're fine. Everything's at the bunk eating. I may not even have to go ride through them. And that's not a bad habit to get into, but it's not the best one. Best way to know for sure is to get your ass in the pen, move them around. If they're laying down, stand them up, watch them travel, and see if there is actually any sickness, or if you're reading it right by everything going to the bunk. Chances are you are. But there's also a decent chance that you're missing something. So it's good to get in your cattle, take a look at them, and get to know them, get to know their habits, get to know their mannerisms, be able to pick out a couple different individual animals out of that lot, that set of cattle. So, particularly good, healthy cattle, like take note of what they look like. So if they're all looking like these healthy cattle in the pen, those sick ones are going to stick out a little bit more. If you're looking to see how healthy your cattle are as opposed to sickness, the sick ones stick out a little bit more. So it's a good thing to get acquainted. Medicine will change. Sometimes not at all. Sometimes it'll change by the week, depending on what kind of setup you got, what kind of outfit you work for, what kind of relationship they have with the pharmaceutical rep, and what kind of deal the pharmaceutical companies are running on their antibiotics. Antibiotics are expensive. Even the cheap stuff's still kind of expensive, particularly when you got low margins on cattle. So it's good to familiarize yourself with different particular drugs, and it's good to know what the after effects are. A really good way to see this is something that, like, a lot that gets mass treated. And for those of you who are not savvy to that, that's when you treat every single animal, whether they need it or not. The pen looks pretty bad, so we're just going to run them all through, give them a shot. Sometimes you'll get a manager who's really fond of doing that. It saves time for your pen riders down the road. Gives your cattle a chance to acclimate, because every drug has some sort of moratorium on it. It has some window where it's active and it's working. And in that window, you don't want to mess with those cattle. If they're so, like, say we treat with, well, just about everybody in the country uses Draxxin to some extent. It's a good drug, overused, I think. but it's a long lasting antibiotic, and we usually give them 6 days of downtime in between treatments. So you pull them on the first, treat them with Draxin. You don't mess with them again unless they're bloated or something like that, where they need attention immediately. You let them be for 6 days, 7 days, depending on where you work. Sometimes it's 5. Some guys don't have any moratorium, and that doesn't make much sense to me. Like that shit you're giving them is not cheap, so give it a chance to work. But at the end of the day, they're not my cattle. I treat them like my own, but I know that they're not. So the boss man, the owner of the cattle, has the final say. And when you get a little too happy on mass treating, that med bill it can rack up pretty quick. So I like to be pretty selective on that too. Once you hit a certain threshold, and if you notice that you're pulling a whole bunch of cattle out of a pen, check your numbers, see how many are temping hot, see what percentage of the total lot has been pulled and treated. And once you get up around 25%, you're probably money ahead, just going ahead and running them all through the chute. And I don't know how it works on the back end with from the office point of view, how that gets conveyed to the owner, explained what you're doing and why you're doing it. But it's always good to have a reason for it. You can say, hey, we've pulled 5 to 6 head out of this pen for 3 days in a row and they're not slowing down. They still look like shit. We're probably going to hit that medicine cost in the long run, one way or the other, if we mass treat them or not. So you might as well be on the safe side and give them all a shot. That can backfire on you, though, because one thing about antibiotics is not only do they kill the bad bacteria, they kill all the bacteria. And it, particularly those long-lasting drugs, can really knock the shit out of them once you treat them. Vaccines are the same way, particularly your killed vaccines. They get what they call the sweats, where cattle just look like shit. And if you think about, I know things got really muddled over COVID and whatnot, but if you go back to how a vaccine works, you're taking a dumbed down version of the virus that you want to protect against. Sometimes it's virus, sometimes it's bacteria, but the illness that you're wanting to protect against, you're giving your animal a dumbed down version of that so that their body can fight it. You're intentionally making them slightly sick. That's what a vaccine does. And because of that, same way, like if you got kids, or if you remember back when you were getting all your vaccine shots growing up, you feel pretty down. I never took the COVID vaccine, so I don't have any personal experience on that, but I know a lot of people that had, and it kind of knocks the shit out of you for a couple days. Sometimes it doesn't. Depends on your body and how they react. But it's a good thing for, say, 2 days after you vaccinate with say a 7 or an 8 way. So it's got black leg. Typically, they throw tetanus in on top of that, and you got a whole bunch of different bovine respiratory diseases that you're protecting against, bacteria based. You run them through the chute, you vaccinate them, and say you pull them 2 days later, it is not going to be uncommon for that entire pen that you just processed to temp hot, because you gave them a dumbed down version of an ailment, and their body is fighting it. You're making them sick, so give it a time Same way with your antibiotics, the long lasting ones. Give it a chance to work. Vaccines are no, I mean, they're a different category of drug, but the same principle applies. Give your medicine a chance to work. Let it run its course. You come back, say 4 or 5 days later, and if there's still some that look real puny, go ahead and take them through the chute and give them a shot of something to make them feel better. But if you took a random sample out of that pin at 2 days versus 4 days, you're going to have a lot more that temp hot 2 days on the 2 day mark as opposed to the 4 day mark. And that's because they're still sick from the vaccine. And you want them to be. You don't want them to be real sick, but that's how you know it's working. If the body is fighting that ailment, it's going to raise the temperature. They're going to run a fever. And you just want them to get over it quickly, just like any other vaccine. There is an inherent risk that you make your cattle sicker than you want them to. But it's, I guess, end of the day, it's you're walking a fine line. You're trying to make money for the owner of the cattle, for your company, whatever. But even when Jackson was super expensive, it used to be, say, a 10cc shot, which, let's say call that a 9-weight steer. You're gonna give him about 10 cc's of Jackson. That used to cost upwards of $30. Now it's around 10 or 15, something like that. But even on the high end, $30 shots a lot cheaper than a $1,200-1,500 head steer or dollar a head steer that dies on you. So mass treatment can be a good thing, but you gotta know what you're doing. You gotta give your chance for your cattle to react to the medicine. You gotta let the medicine work, and then a lot of times you just gotta let the cows be cows and stay on top of your game. Pull when you need to, know when to let it rest. How far are we gone here? I've been yakking for a while, so I'm gonna wrap that up. I'm sure I'll have more of these. I'm gonna call it thoughts from a pin rider. But I've been kind of lacking for content here lately, and I figure might as well just talk about something I know. And as per usual, I got a little long-winded, but I hope you guys got something out of it. If there's any other topics you'd like me to cover in the feedlot business specifically, let me know. Any people that I wouldn't mind talking to some other feedlot guys, particularly if you've been around for a little bit, kind of know the business a little. Hit me up. You can find me on Instagram at moveyourass, MOVEYERASS. And I'll do some question and answer segments for the Patreon, patreon.com/burning-daylight. That's the best way to support the show. Starts out at $5 a month. There's a couple different tiers. Haven't done much with it lately, but I'm going to get back into putting out some bonus content for everybody that subscribes over there, and I appreciate everybody that does. I really do. But anyway, it's been 5 years of Burning Daylight, and I've got no plans to quit anytime soon. So bear with me in the dry spells when I get some writer's block or whatever, and I can't find a good guest to come on and shoot the shit with. But I'm not going anywhere. I'm still gonna crank out some of this cowboy shit. Still gonna talk about a bunch of other stuff. I'm gonna try to make it the most interesting podcast possible for all you working cowboys and cowgirls out there. Got to show equality. I got no problem with the ladies. Got plenty of them that listen to the show, not near as many as the guys. So that's why I talk to the guys more frequently. But I really appreciate everybody who's been with me from the get-go, who continues to tune in when I post a new episode. I know it's a lot harder to find me nowadays, the way the social media censorship has gone, but I'm still out there on all the platforms. Search up Move Your Ass or Burning Daylight Podcast, and you'll find me. Might take a little bit. And if you don't see anything of me particularly on Instagram and Facebook, it's probably because they're not showing any of my stuff. So you got to go find me, follow me, rate, review, subscribe, all that horse shit if you like what I put out. But thanks everybody for making this, and it's been a really cool 5 years. I met a lot of really cool people. I've got to have some really, really cool conversations, and I've made some really good friends doing this. So I appreciate you all tuning in, and I hope you continue to do so. But on that note, I've said enough for one night. Now, move your ass. We're burning daylight.
Your eyes up in the morning, beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. We'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job's done right. Just together, and you won't catch 'em all. But when you ride through the gate, make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In the saddle till the job